This is a reading of an essay published in the Blue Stockings of Japan by Jan Bardsley, and it's a translated work that was published originally in a magazine in Japan called Seīto, which does mean blue stockings. And I encourage you to check out in the link in the description another video, the first video about this, where the Seīto manifesto is, where at the beginning of that video there is an introduction that is really helpful in contextualizing the life of the authors, the times in which they lived, what was going on in Japan at the time, how their writing was received, how they thought about their self-expression as it relates to what was going on in Japan, and also the changes that they were privy to in Western society, reading Western thinkers. So I encourage you to check that out. That this was the first essay that I read from it, and I wanted to publish a reading of it here today. So I encourage you to listen to it. It's 18 minutes long. I think it's really a provocative and immersive and kind of creates a world that was real, that was accurate to a time and a place other than our own, and gives new perspective on what's going on in our world today, and also the progress of women's rights as they have come, where they have come far, and where they have not moved at all, where they are stagnant. To My Lover from a Woman in Prison by Yasuda Satsuki. Published in Seīto, edition 5.6, on June of 1915. Part 1. Nothing but one gloomy day follows another for me, and I have completely lost track of how many already have come and gone. When I am in here like this, I become achingly homesick for the world outside, to be near you, to be at your side. I imagine you are working at that table, aren't you? Last night I thought about how the flower in the bud vase has probably withered, its petals falling off. Nevertheless, you hadn't thrown away this tattered blossom, I imagined, but were gazing at it for me. You see, I have had some pretty strange thoughts in here, such as you're hugging that nightgown of mine all full of patches as you go to sleep every night. And then these things I dream about all seem to become real. I even get the feeling that I am actually seeing them, that I know for a fact that they are true. Do tears come to your eyes when I write like this kind of letter? Then go ahead and cry for me, and work with all your might to make up for my suffering like this. I certainly worry about you. I'm afraid that you may be troubled by what's happened and feeling miserable about it. However, since no matter what comes, my thoughts won't change, and since the law will most likely proceed according to its own conventions, there is nothing at all worth worrying about. The only thing that really concerns me is that you may be thinking of turning your back on the promise you once made to me in some attempt to share my distress. Being apart from you, I am no longer at all sure of what is in your heart. But if, because of your feelings for me, you let yourself fall into this same gloomy world I inhabit, then not only will you die, but I also will die. I realize I am repeating myself here, but please leave all the responsibility in this matter to me, and please concentrate solely on your work. By saying that I am thinking only of you and describing my tender, womanly feelings, I do not mean to make you cry. For if you work as we agreed, I will live in your work. If you pity me, then please love your work and love me too. Embrace my night clothes and my kimono or my rice bowl or my chopsticks or my comb or my powder case. Please kiss whatever is mine. And even though I am here, I will feel it all. I imagine that you are being showered with insults. There goes the lover of the woman who had the abortion. You probably want to come right back at them with, what's it to you? I imagining you doing this makes me want to laugh out loud. Whatever happens is all right though, you know. The two of us are who we are. Or not the two of us, because the two of us are really one, aren't we? This makes me so happy. Even when I am exhausted from the daily interrogation, I remember that at that very moment, there is someone hard at work who knows me inside out. And when I think that you know all there is to know about me, then even if the whole world spits on me, I feel content. Part 2. Furious, the judge pounded on his desk, declaring it a crime worse than nihilism, a crime that showed no thought about either the destruction of human life or the breakdown of morality. This happened after he'd asked me, "Now then, don't you think you've done anything wrong?" And I had answered him with this: "I believe it was wrong, I really do. But what I believe was wrong was the fact that I was careless, and that was because I'd had no experience with pregnancy. I was very wrong not to have taken precautions to prevent a pregnancy, especially as I knew that I did not yet have the capacity to become a mother." I was astonished to see the judge get so angry that he turned red in the face. I had been looking at the ground, responding to the question, when the sound of his fist striking the desk startled me into looking up at his face. How threatening it seemed. I stared at that face. "Don't you realize that you have arbitrarily destroyed human life?" he shouted. I responded a bit sarcastically with, "A woman's body casts away an egg cell every month. I could not feel any life or personality in that egg just because conception had occurred. I suppose because I thought of it as nothing more than a mere appendage to my body. Much less could I feel anything like an instinctive love. And who's ever heard of anyone being called a criminal for cutting off her own arm?" I bet this makes you laugh and think, oh no, she's being sarcastic again. I said several more silly things, but he asked me such ludicrous questions, like, "Didn't you know that if you lived with a man you could get pregnant?" When I said, yes, I knew, he asked, "If you felt you weren't qualified to become a parent, then why did you move in with the man?" How does that strike you? To tell you the truth, I thought it was ridiculous. Imagine making mathematical calculations for the subtle instincts and feelings of human beings. Well, even if the judge can do that, I certainly can't. But as for having been careless and taking on a responsibility we could not carry out, we were indeed at fault and had not given the matter enough thought. But, given what happened, didn't I take the best way out? If I had simply admitted that I had been careless and let things take their course, I would have been doubly guilty of not giving the pregnancy enough thought. Didn't I avoid falling into the trap of such thoughtlessness by taking the action I did? The judge's question struck me as so ridiculous that I finally laughed right out loud, and then I came back with this. "If you don't know that, sir, but wish to inquire, then I suggest you consider that the Creator knows better than I." I can't help it. Even now, this seems funny to me. Where is there a defendant who talks back like this? I bet you think it's funny too, don't you? But when I saw how shocked the judge looked, I suddenly felt sympathy for him. And when I realized that this was a place where nothing other than dead seriousness is permitted, I could not laugh any longer. After this, an intense interrogation followed. The judge had taken what I'd said about my arm and the fetus being the same as some unforgivable and alarming idea. But thinking that I would really like him to understand me, I spoke at great length. Responding to his question, "Why is the fetus an appendage?" I said, "If an arm is cut off, it has no use and no life at all of its own. But a fetus does have the potential for life, and that is where the only difference between the two lies." I knew that if I paused even a moment there, the judge would quickly try to jump in and I would lose my chance to speak, so I went on without stopping. Precisely because a fetus has the potential for life, I felt I had to do what I did. If, no matter how much time went by, it were to have no life and no humanity, then one would not feel particularly responsible for letting things take their course. But a fetus, as soon as it separates from my body, has already moved away from my control and has come into possession of its own precious individual life and personality. Furthermore, it becomes the parent's responsibility to discover and nurture the abilities that sustain that personality. unique abilities hidden deep within that individual. Considering that parents must do this without any mistakes, one cannot help but feel an overwhelming sense of responsibility. The saying, if you make a mistake, just do it again correctly, is a phrase that does not apply to our responsibilities to others. Thus I explained that I had by no means acted rashly or selfishly in this matter. Didn't I think about it day after day without even talking to you about it? All this I told to the judge. At any rate, because this had happened on account of my own carelessness, because I was pregnant, I felt I must exert all my effort for the sake of the child who was to be born. If even my best efforts should fall short, I would have to ask the child to bear with me. Anyway, I felt it would be enough to direct all my energy toward the child I was carrying." End quote. I told the judge this was what I thought when I first learned I was pregnant. He nodded his head several times as if to say that this would have been the right thing to do. However, when I did not continue in this vein, he no longer appeared to agree with me. Part 3. I went on saying, in the beginning I was determined to do this, but when I thought about it a bit further, I realized that while this was convenient for me, it had nothing at all to do with the child's welfare. People conceive children without being in the least aware that, from the start, they are bringing successors into this world. At least, this was true for me. And of course, children do not ask to be born. Is there anything in the world more terrifying than thoughtlessly and without preparation bringing a precious life out of nothingness and into existence, especially when one realizes that one is not yet up to that responsibility? If the fetus had already matured and left my womb, I would have had to swallow my tears and endure whatever unsatisfactory circumstances arose. But as long as the fetus has not matured, it is still just one part of the mother's body. Therefore, I believe it is well within the mother's rights to decide the future of the fetus based on her own assessment of its best interests. If the mother dies, the fetus will inevitably meet the same fate, and I know that the law permits the killing of the fetus for the sake of saving the mother's life. But I did not abort this child for my sake. I aborted it for its own sake. If this were purely my own concern, I could always try to correct any mistake I might make. Even if I were to be crushed and die, the incident would affect only me. But a child, even if it is only a baby, once it leaves the mother's body, has its own life apart from the mother's. Moreover, up until a certain age, the parent who conceived and bore the child is expected to assume full responsibility for it. The parent must look after all the child's needs for a long time. After I thought things through like this, I realized that if I wanted to fulfill my sense of responsibility to the fetus, I had no other choice than to have an abortion. This was the only road I could take. That was my only reason. I had no other ideas apart from this. This was generally the sense of what I said. I really put my heart into it. Even if the judge wouldn't understand me, I wanted to say all that I had to say. When I finished talking, I started sobbing uncontrollably. Remember how much I cried when I talked about this with you, too? In that time, it felt like I was so moved by what I hadn't even said yet that the tears were coming before the words. I felt the same way this time. Whenever I stopped talking, tears would course down my face. But these were not in any sense tears of sadness or shame. They fell one by one, as if the reverberations of my voice had simply shaken them from my eyes. Just then I heard the judge say, "Truly appalling." About the only changes I notice in an entire day are the 3 times when meals are brought to me. The rest of the day I exist in a gray world that makes no distinction between this hour and the hour that follows. The only things that are always working in this world are my blood and my brain. I guess you can imagine my staring at these walls every day while thinking intensely. I'm literally buried in my thoughts. And when I think about the trial, I still cannot find anything wrong with what I said to the judge. I am thinking that, after all, I did not become a slave to petty sentiment. The 2 of us were working as well as we possibly could, weren't we? We work so much that it's as if work were a break for us, isn't it? All the same, we often run out of food. There were even times when all we had to eat was rice cakes once a day. Remember when it got hot, but we had no light kimonos around, so you had to spend the whole day in bed naked while I rushed to wash, dry, and re-sew the one you had? It took until midnight, didn't it? If we are together, I guess we can always get by, no matter what happens. But that doesn't give us the right to force this kind of life on a child, born out of our own selfishness. Even from an ideological standpoint, this is true. I see plenty of mothers and fathers all around, and I'm not satisfied with even a one of them. But I do not have their courage. Unlike them, I cannot face my child with nothing to offer but poverty. This does not mean that I have ever felt any discontent or dissatisfaction with my own parents, although here I am speaking from a child's point of view. It is not a view that parents have any right to expect. If parents cannot fulfill their obligations as parents, then they should absolutely not have become parents in the first place. I learned this when I was on the verge of becoming a parent myself. What a roundabout way I took to find this out. However, at least it was fortunate that I realized this before it was too late. The judge said that such ideas were more dangerous than nihilism. Truly appalling, and quite dangerous. Why, it goes beyond crime, he exclaimed. I have no idea what will happen to me now. The judge kept saying over and over, this would mean the destruction of the whole race. Then he said, don't you realize that if others follow you, using the same excuse, this one crime will only lead to more? I wonder if he thinks that people can really pay attention to such large concerns as, quote, the human race and, quote, other people when they are involved in their own personal problems. I came right back at him, saying, people's private concerns are their own. Humanity as a whole does not determine my personal conduct. Then the judge asked, so do you mean that you did this never knowing that it was a crime? What a stupid question. I answered, criminal law and what is right or wrong are separate issues. However, I knew that if I broke the law, I would be a criminal, and I also knew that what I was doing broke the law. This prompted him to ask why I hadn't turned myself in. I said, it is the law that has branded this a crime, not me. Then the judge said something impressive. At least I admired these words. Even if the authorities aren't aware of it, what do you do about the fact you've broken the law? He was right. Whether or not anybody knew about it, I had broken the law, hadn't I? At that point, I said, I will leave that question to the experts of the court. All I know is that because my beliefs were more compelling than the law, I had no other choice than to follow my conscience. However, when the law comes after me, the matter falls into your hands. I don't know what the judge's decision in my case will be. I think about what will happen. But since my convictions will not change even in the slightest, and what's more, what I've done won't change either, please don't feel sad about anything. And please work with all your might. You have to do my share, too. Part 4. Over and over today I kept seeing our room at home. I bet you haven't swept the room at all since the day I left, right? And you never fold up the bedding either, do you? I imagine the cotton in those old quilts must be starting to come out again. Whenever I sew them up, it comes out, and then I sew them up again, and again the stuffing comes out. Soon you'll have to use a quilt that is stuffing and nothing else. I'm sure of it. But don't let this make you feel gloomy, all right? Somehow I can't help feeling that you are sitting on one corner of the dusty quilt right now, eating cold rice on which you have poured cold water and sprinkled some salt. Am I right? I would surely like to see that. I wonder if you happen to find the salted green peas I had wrapped in paper inside my desk drawer. If you haven't, they must be all dried up by now. I know I'm repeating myself again, but if you really want to help me, please concentrate on your work. Because if by any chance this incident should ruin both of us, I would really hold it against you. That thought worries me so much, I can't stand it. I become unbearably frightened when I think that sometimes, in a state of despair, you might decide to come join me in this dark world. Sometimes I even feel that you may have already come here without my knowing it. Please, let's not waste everything. Ah, now I can see one of your sandals upside down under the stepping stone. The other one has been tossed by the grate. The top layer on that one is beginning to peel off, isn't it?